So now, officially, welcome everyone. I am absolutely thrilled, and today I'm especially thrilled because of technical difficulties that we managed to overcome, to welcome you all here for the fourth episode of our webinar series, PLOS Open 2.0. My name is Agata Morka. I am Regional Director, Publishing Development Europe at PLOS, and I am the host for this series. Some of you might already be familiar with the series. Our goal here is to explore the next big thing in open science with a special focus on Europe. So we gather visionary minds across Europe who push boundaries of open science, and we engage in a lively debate. What is a little bit different about this webinar series is that there is one thing that is strictly forbidden, and that is PowerPoint presentations. So it's not about slides, it's just about lively conversations. Sometimes we disagree, which I think is absolutely fantastic because that's where progress happens. We always meet on Friday afternoons to sort of smoothly slide into the weekend inspired by our talks. So let's jump right in. Today's topic is achieving the impossible diamond open access in Europe. Can scholarly communication exist without paywalls or APCs? Well, it seems that the diamond open access model is taking center stage as a vision for a more equitable and community-driven system of knowledge sharing. As defined by DIAMAS Project, and we will be talking about this project later, Diamond Open Access refers to an equitable model of scholarly publication that charges no fees to authors or readers, and in which the content-related elements of publications are owned and controlled by the scholarly communities. So the diamond momentum is building. We see across Europe and beyond more and more funders are getting involved, more institutions, more researchers and policymakers coming together to really push for this model. But can this model really deliver on its ambitious goals? And today's webinar has a provocative title, Achieving the Impossible. Suggesting that perhaps this diamond revolution might not come without its own challenges. So we have three stellar speakers with us today to tackle the topic. First of all, we have Eva Melinsak-Zlody, who is a librarian at the Library of the University of Zagreb Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences in Croatia. And Eva has, among other activities, of course, has been extensively engaged with the DIAMAS Project, which looked at diamond OA in Europe. And I think that this will be mostly the hat that Eva will have on for today's session. And then we have Jeroen Sondervan, who is program leader, Open Scholarly Communications at Open Science NL. And I hope that he will wear his funder hat. And he will tell us a little bit about the perspective of a Dutch funder towards diamond OA. And finally, we have with us also Rima Maria Rahal, who is a researcher at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. She is also a member of Global Young Academy. And this is the hat that I suppose she will have on for today as an early career researcher to also share her views on diamond OA. Before we start, I always ask my speakers to share something a little bit less professional and more humane with us. Just to sort of break the ice here. So Rima shared with me that she just moved to Austria for a new position, and that while in Austria, she's taking gardening to a next level. So right now we already have some veggies, is that correct, Rima? And cherries also, that's good. As for Eva, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to share.
Well, I don't have a very exciting presence, but maybe just to say that I wasn't always dealing with open science. So I used to be a dancer of contemporary dance and studied philosophy and comparative literature. And I hope that when I get retired, that I can go back to that. The dancing part can be a bit challenging in retirement, but philosophy could do just well, I think.
It's going to be a different type of dancing, perhaps. That's fantastic. That's good to know that there is a life outside of open science. Sometimes we forget that when we constantly talk about open science. Jeroen, anything that you would like to share before I grill you on Diamond Open Access?
Yeah, I was triggered by your promotional post on LinkedIn, showing some cake, some beautiful, lovely, tasteful cake. And yeah, so one of my primary hobbies next to playing the drums is baking and cooking. So and especially baking. So I was triggered by your cake, and well, yeah, maybe we can share some cake during the
Okay. Oh,
conference.
this is I
Baked
will
by me
definitely
and baked by
take you
you.
up on this. Good. Thank you so much. All right, let's dive into our discussion. We will have around 45 minutes for our discussion, and then we'll open up the floor for questions from the audience. So feel free to either raise your hand if you feel comfortable just speaking to us. That would be wonderful. If not, you can also just type your question into our Q&A. Eva, I will start with you. So one of the largest European initiatives focused on Diamond Open Access, which is the DIAMAS Project, recently concluded with a final conference in early June. And among its many outcomes, the project also comprehensively analyzed the Diamond Open Access landscape across Europe. So I was wondering if you could help us frame this discussion. Could you share which of the findings from this report you consider to be the most significant? And I am particularly interested in regional differences in Europe, because obviously it's not a monolith. And having you here with as a stakeholder from Eastern Europe, I hope that it will also bring us a different perspective than the one that we usually present. So outside of the Western-centered academia. Eva, over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. And yes, I am always interested in presenting this part of the world. But to start with the DMS project, so it wasn't exactly the beginning. Even before the project, there was a large study on diamond journals in Europe, actually in the world, but mostly in Europe. So that was a kind of a seed for the later DMS project. But when we started with the project, we actually had quite a lot of discussions about how to frame the survey and the landscaping. And we focused in not only on journals, but on institutions and publishers and any kind of organization that is involved either in publishing or in providing services. So what we did was actually a survey that aimed that so-called, well, that's a very crazy acronym, IPSPs, institutional publishers or service providers to those institutional publishers. So that was a bit puzzling. But we managed to gather responses from many European organizations. And it is true that, well, the results show that the landscape is extremely fragmented and varied. And we did receive responses that were quite difficult to interpret, because we were, of course, aware that partly the response was a result of our activities in engaging the audience, because we had partners from certain countries, and also certain countries are simply more organized and already were involved in diamond publishing. So it was easier to get a response from these communities. So what we got was a lot of responses from Serbia, from Spain, from Croatia, France, and Italy, for example. So not from the same region, but from very different regions. But those are the countries that already had kind of a flourishing diamond culture, but also they had a sort of cohesion factor within a country that could attract a certain number of responses. And so that we cannot say that this sample was representative statistically, but we did get some answers on what can we expect where. And we try to analyze those responses by regions. like Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, and Western Europe. But it turned out that actually this regional division was not so meaningful as when we were looking into specific countries, because even within a certain region, we could see that some countries, so it seemed like this national context with a specific kind of funding, of organizing scientific activity in general, in policy level. It was more influential than, for instance, the regional differences, although they do exist. But we really saw that this national context could be very, very interesting. And of course, there were other factors. For instance, disciplinary cultures were also very very important, and also the type of a legal entity that the publisher is. So there were large differences, for instance, between learned societies and, for instance, publishing entities within research performing organization. So a publisher that had a parent institution that they use as a kind of a financial and organizational parachute would behave differently than a learned society that had to earn their own money for doing the publishing. And when we looked at this national context, for instance, one thing that was very striking is that countries that had functional platforms with a lot of journals already on board were performing much better, meaning they had more open access journals compared to other countries, and sometimes quite significantly more than countries where this activity is quite fragmented. So having a national open access platform was probably the most important cohesive factor, and something that could foster the development of Diamond Open Access. So, and this was for many reasons. One is definitely financial, because having a joint platform could help journals and journal editors and publishers to start publishing a journal easier with less funds and leaning on something that already existed. But it wasn't just for these organizational and sustainability reasons. It was also sometimes for raising quality criteria, for defining policies. So we actually observed that these platforms often used as a kind of a policy tool for, because if the platform has certain quality standard and policy criteria, then they were further down passed on certain journals, and then the whole landscape would look differently. So this was a very important part. And also another important factor was in countries that have their national subsidy programs on a because they usually come with certain kind of criteria to allocate these subsidies, and they also serve as both as a policy tool and as an enabling tool. So that was also something very interesting and helpful. Of course, that doesn't always come without a cost. So, for instance, when we looked at especially the sustainability part was a large focus of the study. So we did see that there were certain types of funding streams that were prevalent in our sample, although again, landscape was very varying. So for each of the, for instance, for each of the funding stream that we examined, there were some publishers who would say, no, this is not applicable to me at all. And there were some that were depending on that very highly. So we cannot make any kind of general conclusions. And also very often one publisher or one service provider would need to receive funding from multiple sources or from more than one source to actually make their living. So that was quite interesting. But among the funding streams that were most often reported as used by our respondents were in-kind contributions by parent organizations. So for many publishing units, this kind of dependency on the parent organizations was actually crucial, which can have a good side and a bad side. Because on one hand, if you have a dedicated organization, I don't know, a university that will support its publishing program, then it's certainly a good thing. But if this dependency is kind of if there is a volatility in the way that the university is dedicating its funds to journals, for instance, then it can be a tricky position for a publisher. And the same goes for the next thing that was also most often mentioned is the state subsidies or the public subsidies, because they can also have a kind of a stability effect, because especially if they are permanent or if they are recurring, then publishers can rely on them. If they have a transparent criteria for allocation, then this is really a good mechanism. But sometimes this is also a political thing. So by changing the political culture in a country or a system, then suddenly there can be a disruption. Also, this kind of funding is time limited. It can come with certain restraints. So sometimes it is also a lot of publishers that were responding to the survey complained about certain elements of this public subsidy scheme. So it seems like all of these funding stream can have a good side and a bad side at the same time. So it was interesting.
Wonderful. Eva, can I, because it's a
yes.
good place, I think, to now talk to Jeroen, because we talked so much about funding. There is also a question for you in Q&A about the definition of an institutional publisher. And someone is asking that if university presses also count as institutional publishers, which I believe they do.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so from what you were saying, I gather that this financial situation is a little bit delicate and very complex. So now, Jeroen, over to you. As a funder coming from the Netherlands, we saw an increasing number of funders who are voicing their support towards the Diamond Open Access model, and the Netherlands being one of them, and NWO. We saw it already in 2022 when ANR backed the action plan for Diamond Open Access. But I am more interested in the concrete support that funders are providing, whether it is through direct funding or capacity building efforts. What is NWO doing to support Diamond OA? And perhaps more importantly, why does NWO see this model as worth investing in?
Yes, thank you, Agatha, and also for inviting me and organizing this panel. Before I start diving into specific things we do and the more practical things we do, let me briefly sketch the landscape in the Netherlands, the current landscape, because you already mentioned Open Science NL. I'm program leader of Open Scholarly Communication within that program, which is a 10-year, we call it initiative. And it is a collaboration between many stakeholders, so universities, data repositories, universities of applied sciences. So we have a lot of stakeholders involved in that national big 10-year project, which comes with direct funding from the ministry. And then we have the NWO as a funding council, which is part of the Open Science NL governance and one of the parties involved in that national project. But the Open Science NL is embedded in the NWO, the Dutch Research Council. So of course there is a lot of alignment between these two entities, of which NWO is it's a funder. It's our national research funder. So that will exist for infinity, hopefully. Open Science NL is really an impulse to advance with open science at large, right? So it's open scholarly communication, but it's also fair data and also open research software, societal engagement and public engagement, citizen science. These kinds of efforts are being included in this national program. For the NWO as a research council, we have a dedicated fund for our open science policies, right? So that's a firm budget in the NWO budget, which we can spend on programs, initiatives, membership fees to support Diamond Open Access, for instance. So that's from the NWO, the Funding Council perspective. What we also did, and now I'm getting into more the practical stuff and the actual doing, is a couple of years ago, we, as NWO, the Funding Council, supported the startup of our national journal platform, openjournals.nl. And you have similar platforms. Eva already mentioned this perspective, right? In Croatia, you have a large one. In Denmark, in Finland, there are many even long-standing national platforms in Europe already. But they need to be they need to professionalize, they need to become sustainable. And that's an important thing where funders indeed play an important role. From the activities, it's much more than only fund infrastructure, right? So what we do is also look at how to empower the communities. And I want to build up these sort of practical implementations using communities, capacity building, you already mentioned that, and infrastructure. So in terms of communities, what we've done in the Open Science NL initiative is that there is a thriving at local level. So at all universities, for instance, we have these so-called open science communities, and you now have several in other parts of the world. But we strengthen those communities with a small subsidy, because there it happens, right? There researchers and support staff meet, they talk with each other, they learn from each other, and they share best practices. And this is where it should happen, and where you talk about the new norm, right? And hopefully move with the community to the new norm. Being open science and being Diamond Open Access, hopefully. The capacity is really focused on, and we have a current project running in the Netherlands. It's called Strengthening Diamond Open Access, which is coordinated by the universities and the university libraries in the Netherlands. But we, as NWO and Open Science NL, are closely connected, and we speak with each other, of course, and we try to align policy and also funding initiatives, of course, on this higher level. But it's really about strengthening the so-called new university presses, so fully open university presses in the Netherlands. We have several of them at the moment. We have this infrastructure, openjournals.nl, and we also have now this, we call it expertise center, but you can also call it the capacity hub, right? The Dutch capacity hub. It's basically more or less the same as what in the DIAMAS is called a capacity hub. Basically, it all comes together there, right? So they share expertise, they make training materials, they engage with editors, but also researchers. They try to build up a sort of ambassador layer of people or researchers that are actually publish in Diamond Open Access. So, and that's really growing. And one of the things we look at as Open Science NL initiative is really strengthen this network of the so-called new university presses, because they have also an important, very local role to play at their respective universities, but also as a network, a national network, and also in collaboration, of course, with other European countries with like-minded open university presses. And then the infrastructural part, several layers. So I already mentioned openjournals.nl as a sort of national infrastructure, but there's also local infrastructure. So we have, for instance, Groningen University Press, who runs 25 plus Diamond open access journals. We have Delft University Press, who runs 15, I think, Diamond open access journals, and some other pockets in the Netherlands. So it's not like an either or, it's really collaborating with each other and also looking at, let's say, these collaborations between these infrastructures. And that's also where this community building, of course, has also a role to play. What we also did, that call for proposals was issued last year by Open Science NL, is the so-called Open Science Infrastructure Call, which is really broad. So it takes open science. The direction of travel is the UNESCO recommendation. So it's basically infrastructure for open access, for the fair data, for software, for all these aspects of open science. We issued that call last year. It's basically our flagship journal with, the back of my head, it was a 17 million euros, I think, in that call to spend on infrastructure. We are in the midst of reviewing all the proposals. We have seen a tremendous amount of proposals and interest in that call, as was expected. So I can't share any final outcomes yet. That will be at the end of the year. But it will be interesting to see if what happens there on that infrastructural part within the realm of open scholarly communication, of course. And the other thing I wanted to mention, where we as NWO, but in collaboration with a lot of European funders, could play also a role in changing this landscape, is Open Research Europe. And with 11 funders, we signed as a collective in January this statement of intent to further support Open Research Europe as a completely publicly, fully open scholarly communication platform with open peer review and all the things that are already there. But now it's only for if you have a European Commission grant, a Horizon Europe, of an ERC grant. But the idea is to really expand this and make it available for researchers from the respective countries where the funder is signing up for ORA. More about that next year, and you can read a lot about that online and also on the Open Research Europe website. And then the last but not least, the question: why are we engaging with Diamond Open Access in the first place? For several reasons, but one I want to pick one is that the Netherlands has a long history now, over 10 years, with the so-called read and publish deals, with a small set of highly commercial, for-profit, profit-driven publishers. We all know them, and they are helpful, right? They unburden the researcher. Yes, they do. But what we also see is that they are becoming more and more expensive every year. And the other thing is that there is this, next to the read and publish deals, we see this, we call it APCs in the wild. So a lot of full open access journals from those publishers as well, but also independent ones like PLOS or like Frontiers or MDPI. What do you have? We see a steep increase in expenditures there. So last year we did a research based on open metadata, and we did an estimation. So only for the Dutch Research Council and ZonMW, which is our medical sister council, related papers, it added up to 11 million euros, which was spent or possibly spent for those 3,500 from the back of my head publications. So you can do the math how much an average APC is. But we don't have like really a sense of what's happening on this local level, right? Within institutions, departments, faculty, or at the researcher desk. So that's also one of the strategies to bring more coordination in that specific area. And the other thing is, we want to create alternatives, because we spend a lot of money in those hybrid deals. We want to move to a full OA landscape eventually. So we want to create valuable, sustainable alternatives that are more focused on inclusivity and transparency and these open science principles. Yeah, so that's I guess several reasons, but yeah, what I wanted to say about that.
Thank you, Jeroen. That's wonderful. There is a question for you in Q&A, but I will park it for now for our discussion later. Rima, over to you, because we talked so much here about, financial considerations, infrastructure, and so on, but I would like to hear a voice of a researcher. So I'm very much interested in your view on the Diamond open access model, and to what extent do early career researchers like yourself consider revenue models when selecting where to publish, especially given the implications for career development? Is this something that you think about? Is this a factor or not at all?
Yeah, definitely something I think about. And generally, I think Diamond open access is the way to go. I love it. I'm all for it. But unfortunately, I think I sometimes cannot afford to be so idealistic. But there's a big disconnect between what I feel is where I'd like to publish and how I'd like my papers to be available, and what I would like to be able to consider in terms of a revenue model, for instance, and what is kind of necessary for me to play the game and to be able to stick around in academia. So I think in practice, publishing decisions today, especially for early career researchers, are actually made mostly depending on an inherited reputational system. So which journals the community holds in high regard basically is not undergoing as quick a change as I think all of us idealists would actually like it to. So there's not a lot of change there. And so I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you introduce a new Diamond open access journal, it's just really difficult because people are in this mindset of this never-ending story where you just have to publish in a certain well-established journal to be able to get the job. So economists would basically say the entry barriers are high, and this is the case because of funding and so on, but also because of adoption, right? It's the researchers who need to send their research there, and this is, I think, where the biggest problem arises for disruptive publishing models. So new journals do have the power to change the way that we publish, but they require kind of buy-in from the researchers, and especially I would say researchers in established positions, because early career researchers, we have pretty limited power to make change in this particular case, because we are competing for positions that are given out based on publications, often in the traditional journals. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't in good conscience hedge on publishing only in Diamond open access journals, because with this, I wouldn't be able to secure a position. And the same, I think, is true for securing future funding for research groups, research positions, research projects. Here, funders also look for high impact publications in traditional journals. So in other words, what I think we would need is actually for our senior colleagues to those who are in permanent positions, those who don't need their 10th publication in like one of these traditional journals or like the 100th publication, for them to send their best work over to Diamond open access journals, because this could actually make the change in the journal's reputation, and that could make change more generally in the landscape if there was a community effort to build new systems for reputation. And I think I've already like heavily hinted at the fact that I think this needs to be flanked not just by the introduction of new journals. I usually have a pretty large selection of journals that I could send my work to, but effectively the selection ends up being very small because of the reputation system that's kind of in place. So what I think is something that we need is to be flanking these changes in the publication landscape by changes in the way that we do science policy, which specifically means we need open access publications recognized and applauded for hiring, for promoting, and also for decisions by funders. And I think as long as this is not happening, I really don't, I'm not very optimistic, let's say, and I hate to be the party pooper here. I'm not very optimistic about where introduction of Diamond open access journals could take us. And I say this even though I'm on the editorial board of one and the advisory board of another. So I'm all for it, and I idealistically totally support the idea. But I think in reality, for many early career researchers, this is not the game we can play at the moment.
Thank you so much, Rima, for this very honest response. I love a party pooper myself, because a party pooper always forces you to rethink things a little bit. Indeed, this idealistic aspect of Diamond OA is also something that you all hinted on. So I would like to go a little bit farther towards this idealistic vision, perhaps. And I want to ask all of you, how do you see the future of Diamond open access in the next 5 years? Because we've seen it growing, gaining momentum over the past 5-10 years, let's say. How do you think it will evolve? Do you believe that Europe will play a central role in this development? And what do you consider as the biggest challenges for the future of Diamond OA? Rima, if you are ready to go, we can continue with you and then go to Jeroen and Eva.
Sure. Well, let me try to reiterate what I think is the most important bit, which is to make science policy that actually allows us to focus on quality of our work and not on kind of finding a traditional journal that has great reputation historically to position our research as an output. So I think we need to really carefully think about how we evaluate and assess research works. I think this is a very important keyword here. And based on better ways of assessing research quality, there needs to be policy change towards recognizing good research quality over just quantity and inherited reputation, I would say. And I would think that Europe is quite well positioned to do this because we have the potential to make change here. So I hope that we're sitting in the right spot to see this development going in this direction.
Okay, wonderful. And I can see that we have more and more comments and questions in our Q&A. This is fantastic. I will get back to this. But Eva, I wanted to ask for your vision for Diamond OA for the next 5 years.
Oh, well, I hope. So it's very difficult sometimes to find the right middle between being idealistic and being pragmatic. I believe that there are some efforts, especially like the Netherlands case, the French case, the Switzerland case, where we really see that governments and institutions and funders are putting their money where their policy is. So on the political level, we already have a very good will to change both the assessment system with COARA and many signatories of the COARA agreement, yet of course it's not yet realized in every workplace that you have to fight for, but things are moving, and together with putting resources and funds into funding diamond journals, and not only so not starting the new ones, but also helping transition the existing one with the existing reputation to the diamond model, that will certainly help. Whether Europe will be the leading here, I'm not entirely sure, because we already have some parts of the world where diamond is dominant model of publishing. So, and there are some right now, there is, for instance, the DIAMAS Project that is seeking for alignment on the international level, which is also something very important. But also there is one thing that I would like to mention related to what Rima said, is that there are disciplinary differences also present. For instance, it's much easier in arts and humanities, where you can publish sometimes in your own local language in smaller local journals and still get recognition for that. So then it's easier to transition to diamond model than when you are in highly international and competitive disciplines. So we will see how this will play out, but I think that there is a future for diamond as a very viable alternative that is growing in importance.
Thank you, Eva. Jeroen, are you equally optimistic?
I very much agree with what Eva just said. So I'm positive, but I'm also optimistic by life. So I'm quite positive that we will, in 5 years, at least, because looking at, for instance, at the Netherlands, the output, the Diamond OA output, in terms of articles or percentages, it's around 6%, 7% last year. And with all the efforts we do and all the attention it has currently, I think within 5 years we can grow above the 10, right? Maybe to the 50% as compared to the other routes. So that's my optimistic view. The pessimistic view is that still, and I very much relate to what Rima said, because I know these stories, of course, coming from Utrecht University, my previous work as an open access advisor, consultant, working a lot with early career researchers. And this is really one of the biggest hurdles. Basically, it's maybe the biggest elephant in the room here, right? So this whole research assessment. But as Eva said, there are steps being taken with the COARA coalition of advancing research assessment. And on a national level, we currently have a project. It's called Room for Everyone's Talent, which basically focuses on the transformation of this research assessment, taking open science immediately into a perspective, and a lot of other things, of course. But open science is really also looked at to be part of research assessment at universities and other institutions. So we are basically here in a cultural shift at large, right? Going to open science with publishing and with a lot of other practices, and research assessment need to follow, of course, and it takes time, as we know that cultural shifts take a lot of time. So so maybe that's a optimistic, pessimistic in between thing here. And the other thing I wanted to mention is what I see in the last couple of years, that it's, and this is a difficult thing to tackle as well, is to basically reallocate the money we spend towards, for instance, read and publish deals or other ways of open access to support Diamond Open Access. And yeah, it's so for me, Diamond Open Access is something else. It's like it's a funding model. It's basically research infrastructure we want to fund, instead of we want to buy something, access to literature and more publications within those large deals, for instance. So it's a different ballgame in my perspective. And if you think a bit out of the box in that sense, maybe that could help in reallocating these funds, which are within the institutions and with funding councils, but also other research institutions, and maybe also on a European level. But that's really a challenge, I think, to come to a more more collaboration in that area.
Thank you so much, Jeroen. I'm scanning our Q&A here, and I think that it's a good segue, what you just said about collaboration, to a question we have about infrastructure. So there is one from Nino, and if you would like to come and just ask your question, then that's fine. Just raise your hand. I will allow you to speak. But I'm going to read it out loud. So regarding public platforms, is it wise to have one national platform infrastructure, or can those be transnational for use from society journals from other countries? Or would you recommend that each university would start offering a platform for Diamond Open Access journals?
My first response would be that you can have a national platform, but not the only. So that's I think there needs to be a sort of pluriformity, right? So that's Diamond as well. So serving very local initiatives, but also maybe work with national initiatives or maybe transnational initiatives. That's an interesting one, which is already happening because some of these national platforms are already working together in some areas. For instance, the most of them use open journal systems as their infrastructure. So it really makes sense to work together on a technical level and with PKP as the software developer, and it already happens here and there. So that's one example. And one other thing is that a national platform could also mean cost savings, right? So if every university in a country is doing more or less the same as the national infrastructure is doing, maybe it's better to align or make it as interoperable as possible on a technical level, so you can save money in that area.
All right. I think that there are more infrastructure-related questions here. Danny Smith. Danny, would you like to ask your question, or shall I just read it out loud here? Because this one is a little bit delicate. It's about Open Research Europe. I'm just going to read it out loud then. I don't know who would like to tackle this one. Perhaps you, Jeroen, because you mentioned Open Research Europe.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can.
So the question, yeah, just go ahead. If you can read it out loud for everyone to.
Yeah, with
know.
regards to Open Research Europe, are the costs that funders pay to Taylor and Francis for the platform publicly available? Also, as there are multiple funders paying Taylor and Francis for their own iteration of the Faculty 1000 platform, for instance, Welcome and Gates, why are they not pooling resources to develop their own open source platform that can then be adapted by any organization wishing to develop a similar Diamond OA platform? I cannot speak for, of course, my colleagues Welcome and Gates, and so with the funder, the cost that funders pay to Taylor and Francis. Currently, Open Research Europe is only funded by the European Commission, and Faculty 1000, which is bought by Taylor and Francis indeed a couple of years ago, is the publisher of the platform. The new platform, so after this year, so to be launched 2026, is fully publicly owned by the funders and also funded by the European Commission. So it's really something else than the current Open Research Europe, I would say. So it is a step towards the last sentence maybe. It is a way of pooling resources basically now from 11 funders and hopefully more, and hopefully institutions will also join Open Research Europe, because we need basically the communities on local level as well to support this infrastructure, of course, by actually publishing on Aura or the future Aura. So basically this is a way of pooling resources from different funding councils and therefore different countries to build a European infrastructure, which is Open Research Europe.
Thank you, Jeroen. And Danny, I only saw now that you raised your hand, so you are allowed to talk if you would like to take this further.
I was just putting my hand up to say that I was happy to come on and sort of read the question and explain it, but obviously Jeroen has read it out and answered it. So just to clarify, so that I'm sure that I've understood correctly. So the future iteration of Open Research Europe is going to be an open source platform that other institutions can adopt and tweak as they see fit?
Yeah, so it will be open source in terms of that it will run, and it has been announced, it will run an open journals system software, which is open source. So yes, so that's the whole idea, to make it as open as possible. Indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeroen, and thank you, Danny. One more question. I think we have time for one more question, and there is a nice one to probably wrap up this discussion. Coming from Saba, if you would like to speak for yourself, please raise your hand. If not, then I will just read it out. It's a provocative question that has to do with some guerrilla strategies. So Saba is asking, should we be looking at pushing a more guerrilla strategy? lobbying journal editorial boards to quit commercial publishers and move to newer Diamond open access journals, and see if this means their reputations also carry over. I'm reminded of a similar recent event in neuroscience where the editorial board quit because of high APCs. Who would like to take this one on and talk about a more aggressive strategy, I suppose, towards Diamond OA?
Yeah, maybe I can hazard a quick first answer. Of course, happy to have any additions from everyone else. But my intuition would be that I'm always down for a little bit of revolution, and this sounds like a good idea to me. So I think there are different ways to achieve normative change, and eventually this is kind of what we need to be able to move from the traditionally inherited system towards doing something different, right? Jeroen also said this before. We need to change the norms of how people engage with publishing. There's one way to do this, which is a kind of the slow and grinding way to take one baby step at a time. Another way is to make a big change and a radical change. And I think if both come together, actually, then we probably have the most promising way to go forward. But I do believe that established researchers stepping out of roles in journals that they find for reasons like high APCs to become problematic. Maybe they weren't before, but now they find that this is no longer something they can support, and rather putting their support and with that their reputation and their expertise towards a different place where we can hope for high quality and a fairer way to publish. I would believe that this is actually a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other views, Eva or Jeroen, on this one?
Yeah, I only mention a very small thing is that in the Netherlands with the library community and the National Working Group Open Access, they prepared a guide, Flip Your Journal. So it's a very practical guide. We produce several of these more open science related guides, but this was one of them published in January, and basically gives a lot of practical tips and which steps to take to flip your journal to a Diamond OA model. So I guess that's a very sort of community-based, practical, maybe guerrilla kind of approach. Just give researchers and editorial boards enough information and raise awareness and support to actually take the step.
Maybe I can chime in with just one more thought to add. Yes. So I don't think it's necessarily only the editors who are in a position of power where their change in behavior can affect more general change, but I believe it would also be, for instance, reviewers. So we saw this with the peer reviewers openness initiative, where reviewers such as myself, we pledged to only recommend publications or manuscripts for publication if they were adhering to some basic open science criteria, like having materials on code openly available so that we could actually conduct a thorough review and really see what the paper is based on. With a similar idea to this, I believe that there is a lot of potential for change that is not just with the very few who are in the positions of journal editors, but also with a much larger group, I believe, of people who have reviewer roles.
Thank you so much. And Nino, I saw that you asked for where the Flip Your Journal guide is. I think that I found it online, Jeroen, but if it's not the correct one, please make sure to
I added it in the chat. The link is in the chat.
Yep. All right, great. Okay, so we have this information. All right, good. I'm looking at our clock here. Is there anything else? Is there any other question that you are just dying to ask before we close the session? Then now is the time. I don't see see anything, and we already had some questions that Rima kindly answered. I will be also looking after at the recordings. If there are any unanswered questions, we will make sure that we will provide you with answers to that. Okay, thank you so very much for this discussion. I think that what we've seen is, first of all, that the landscape, the Diamond Open Access landscape, although it is gaining momentum, we are still talking about a niche in a way. We are talking here, and you said about 6 to 7% of all publications. The landscape in Europe is very fragmented. I think that Eva, you also mentioned that we have a lot to learn from other places where Diamond OA has been, a practice established for years, like Latin America. Now we are also looking to Africa and learn our lessons from there. There is a lot of enthusiasm around this new model. I think that also it's quite interesting to see what type of vocabulary is used when we talk about Diamond Open Access. So we talk about alternative models, we talk about revolution even. So let's see how this all evolves, whether we will hit 10%, as you said, Jeroen, in your optimistic prediction here next year. I would love to actually come back to this discussion maybe in a year or so to see where we are, where we will be at that point in time. Thank you so very much for this meeting, and I am also encouraging you to come to our next episode, which I think will be after the summer break. I don't think we will have anything in August because everyone will be vacationing, hopefully. So I invite you very warmly to join us in September or October. This time we will be talking about meta science. So we will be talking about research on open science practices and whether we have some really viable, tangible evidence of benefits of open science. Thank you so very much. That's it for today. Thank you to the speakers and the audience, and I hope to see you in September. Thank you. Bye-bye.